Imagine being the most powerful person in a country for over 30 decades. No, not just a president, but the supreme leader. The one who calls the shots, not just in politics, but in religion, law, and even military action. That was Ali Khamenei. Born in 1939, this man didn't just shape Iran's destiny. He pretty much drove the car and decided when to hit the brakes. For years, his face was on every billboard. His voice echoed through every street. His rule? Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly what you'd call a walk in the park. But who was this man? How did he rise from being a clandestine revolutionary to a global political giant? And what exactly makes him tick? Welcome to the full biography of Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. Buckle up. It's going to be one wild ride. Ali Khamenei was born in 1939 in Mashhad, Iran. And if you're thinking, hold on, that's not too long ago, well, we're talking about a man whose influence has shaped generations. But let's rewind a bit. Growing up in a city known for its deep religious history, Khamenei didn't exactly have a childhood filled with toys and soccer games. Instead, he was immersed in the world of religious study, with his father being a well-respected cleric himself. His early education? You guessed it, Islamic studies. Khamenei wasn't just reading textbooks, he was diving into the classics of Shia scholarship, absorbing centuries-old teachings like a sponge. Think of it as a crash course in religion, philosophy, and power, all rolled into one. But it wasn't just Mashhad that shaped him. No, he ventured to the holy cities of Qom and Najaf, the beating heart of Shia scholarship. Here, he studied under some of the most influential clerics of the time. It was almost like joining an elite club, but instead of golf, they were discussing the fate of nations and the role of the clergy in government. At just 19, Ali had already stepped into the world of politics, finding himself embroiled in the anti-Shah movements that were sweeping Iran. The Shah, think of him like the overbearing monarch that everyone loved to hate, was a perfect target for Khamenei's growing political ambitions. This wasn't just about spirituality anymore. It was about power.
So, here's where things get interesting. It's the 1970s, and Iran is a powder keg. Khamenei, already steeped in the art of Islamic theology, wasn't just sitting in a mosque reading dusty books. No, he was getting his hands dirty in politics, and more specifically, anti-Shah activism. Now, the Shah of Iran was no saint. Under his rule, the country was modernizing rapidly, but at the cost of personal freedoms. This is where Khamenei saw his chance. He didn't like the way the Shah was running the show. Too much Western influence, too much secularism. Khamenei wasn't just an observer. He became a vocal critic of the regime, organizing protests, writing revolutionary pamphlets, and, well, getting arrested a lot. In fact, he spent so much time behind bars that you'd think they had a permanent cell with his name on it. But while Khamenei was fighting the Shah's regime, he wasn't alone. He was part of a growing movement of young revolutionaries who wanted to see Iran transformed. And one of the most influential figures in this movement, none other than Ruhollah Khamenei, the man who would become Iran's first supreme leader. Fast forward to 1979. The Islamic Revolution is underway. The Shah is out and Khomeini is in. Khamenei's role in this revolution, well, let's just say it wasn't small. As Iran overthrew its monarchy and transitioned to an Islamic republic, Khamenei was one of the key players. He wasn't just a bystander, he was active in shaping the new political order. But of course, no revolution comes with its share of drama. As the dust settled and Khomeini took power, Khamenei found himself in the midst of a power struggle. In the early days of the Islamic Republic, Khamenei was quickly promoted to president, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. After the Islamic Revolution turned Iran upside down in 1979, things didn't exactly calm down. In fact, Iran was in chaos. Khomeini, the leader of the revolution, was steering the ship, but the country needed someone to take the wheel for the long haul. Enter Ali Khamenei.
who was about to take on a new role that would set the stage for his rise to ultimate power. In the early 1980s, Iran was a country in the process of rebuilding itself. But before Khamenei could become the supreme leader, he first had to climb the political ladder, and his first step, becoming Iran's president in 1981. Khamenei served as president for 2 terms, a period marked by both challenge and opportunity. The most immediate challenge, Iran was embroiled in the Iran-Iraq War. Khamenei was tasked with leading a country under siege, facing economic hardships, military losses, and the constant fear of a Saddam Hussein-led invasion. But Khamenei was no rookie. He had been involved in the revolutionary struggle for years. As president, he coordinated efforts to keep the country unified, urging civilians to take up arms in defense of their homeland. It was a leadership test that shaped his political identity. But the true turning point came in 1989. After the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran was faced with the monumental task of replacing Iran's first supreme leader. It was a delicate situation. Khomeini was more than just a leader, he was a symbol. But Khamenei, with his military experience, political savvy, and unwavering loyalty to the revolution, was ready to step into those giant shoes. Despite not holding the highest religious rank, Khamenei was appointed as the new supreme leader. His rise to power wasn't purely based on religious merit. Political alliances, military support, and his own strategic maneuvering were key. The clerical establishment supported him, and the rest, as they say, is history. Okay, so Khamenei is now the supreme leader of Iran. But what exactly does that mean? Well, buckle up, because it's more than just wearing a fancy robe and holding a big title. The role of supreme leader in Iran is unique, to say the least. Iran's system is a blend of theocracy and republic, but the supreme leader holds ultimate authority. We're talking control over military, religion, government, and even the media. While the president and parliament exist, they answer to the supreme leader. We could say the presidency is more like the manager of Iran, but the supreme leader, he's the CEO of the whole operation. Khamenei's power is no joke. He controlled the military and judiciary, and even had a hand in deciding foreign policy. That's right, he was the ultimate decision maker, and his influence spread from Tehran to Baghdad, Damascus, and even Beirut. In short, if you wanted to get anything done in the Middle East, you had to go through him. And don't even get me started on his public image. Khamenei's face became a symbol of Iran's resistance, resisting the West, resisting foreign influence, and resisting anyone who didn't fit his vision of an Islamic republic. Whether you agreed with him or not, his presence was undeniable. He was everywhere, on billboards, in the media, in the streets. But what about the international stage? Khamenei's foreign policy was no less authoritative. His anti-Western stance, especially towards the US and Israel, became his defining feature. Iran's nuclear program, supported and maintained under Khamenei's leadership. Relations with Russia, China, and various militias in the region, all shaped by Khamenei's vision of a powerful, independent Iran. As supreme leader, Khamenei saw Iran as a force to be reckoned with, a regional power that could project influence well beyond its borders. Whether it was supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon or backing Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, his hand was always in play. But this wasn't just about military might. He also used soft power, such as the promotion of Shia Islam and Iran's revolutionary ideology. His dominance wasn't just physical, it was ideological. And with the power of the supreme leader, Khamenei reshaped Iran's politics in ways that continue to have an impact today. So while the world watched, Iran changed under his rule, and it wasn't always easy to love or even like him. But the question is, could anyone ignore him?
We can't just talk about power and authority without diving into the controversies and criticisms that surrounded Khamenei during his long reign. Let's face it, you don't get to hold on to power for over 3 decades without a fair share of opposition, and Khamenei had plenty of that. First, let's talk about human rights.
Khamenei's government was frequently criticized for its repressive measures. Dissidents were silenced, journalists imprisoned, and political opposition, well, let's just say it didn't have much room to breathe under Khamenei's watch. His regime used violence and fear to maintain control, and any sign of public dissent, whether it was against the government or the supreme leader himself, was often met with a swift crackdown. Take the 2009 protests, for example. Following the highly controversial presidential elections, millions of Iranians took to the streets demanding justice. The Green Movement, led by opposition leaders like Mir Hossein Mousavi, wanted a change. But what did Khamenei do? He didn't call for dialogue or negotiation. Instead, he sided with violence, ordering the military and police to put down the protests. The streets were flooded with tear gas and bullets, leaving countless injured and killed. The message was clear: don't challenge the status quo. And it wasn't just within Iran where Khamenei faced criticism. The international community had its share of issues with him. He was widely criticized for his nuclear ambitions, which brought Iran into direct confrontation with the West. The US, Israel, and even the United Nations raised alarms, accusing Khamenei of seeking to develop nuclear weapons under the guise of a peaceful nuclear program. But Khamenei wasn't backing down. He firmly believed that Iran had the right to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, of course with a few peaceful purposes that made the West a bit nervous. His stance on the nuclear program became one of the most contentious issues of his leadership, keeping tensions high for years. Then we've got the human rights record. Critics pointed out that during his rule, Iran continued to see high-profile executions, especially for those deemed enemies of the state. Freedom of expression was stifled, and the country saw widespread restrictions on press freedom and freedom of assembly. But for Khamenei, these measures were simply part of maintaining order. Control, he argued, was essential to preserve the Islamic Revolution and the values he fought for. It was a no-compromise stance that earned him admiration for his supporters, but severe condemnation from critics. Khamenei's legacy, then, became one of stark polarization. In Iran, some saw him as the defender of the revolution, while others viewed him as a tyrant who quashed dissent and turned his country into an authoritarian state. As we get into the final stretch of Khamenei's life, things started to get complicated. By the mid-2010s, Khamenei had firmly solidified his position as the undisputed ruler of Iran. But as the years passed, a new reality began to set in. Khamenei was getting older, and with age comes one thing every leader must eventually face: the question of succession. For years, rumors swirled about his health. Was he suffering from serious illnesses? Was he preparing to hand over the reins of power? The Iranian people were left wondering who would succeed the man who had ruled them for decades. But Khamenei wasn't about to waste time on such matters. He had already made his move. His eldest son, Mojtaba Khamenei, was being groomed for the role of supreme leader. Dynastic succession? Yep, it was happening. And while Mojtaba was largely seen as an heir to his father's authority, he didn't have the same level of support from the clerical establishment or the people. But Khamenei wasn't about to let foreign pressures or internal dissent derail his plans. As the years went on, he maintained his tight grip on Iran, ensuring that any moves to weaken his influence were swiftly crushed. But in 2026, fate took an unexpected turn. In a shocking series of events, Khamenei was assassinated in a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, a move that would mark the end of an era for Iran and the entire Middle East. His death sent shockwaves throughout the region, leaving a power vacuum that Iran was not ready for. For some, Khamenei's death symbolized the fall of an empire. For others, it was the end of an oppressive regime. Regardless of one's view of the man, his death marked the end of an era, one that had defined the modern history of Iran. The world now had to come to terms with a post-Khamenei Iran, and as we'll see, his passing would spark debates about what's next for the country and its place on the global stage. But in the meantime, His absence left a gaping hole in the political and religious fabric of Iran.
With Khamenei's sudden death, Iran faced a crisis that had been building for years: succession. After over 30 decades of leadership, the question on everyone's mind was, who could possibly fill the shoes of the man who had controlled Iran's fate for so long? For many, the natural successor seemed to be Mojtaba Khamenei, Khamenei's eldest son. But this wasn't a smooth transition. In a country where the power of the supreme leader was meant to come from divine legitimacy and political influence, the idea of dynastic succession wasn't exactly popular among the clerical elite. Mojtaba, while certainly groomed for the role by his father, wasn't guaranteed to inherit the same support. Iran's top clerics, who had long been at odds with Khamenei's concentration of power, were reluctant to give Mojtaba the same level of authority his father commanded. The supreme leader was supposed to be a spiritual leader, not a political prince, and the Iranian people weren't exactly thrilled with the idea of a hereditary monarchy disguised as a republic. As the power struggle intensified, hardliners and reformists both tried to jockey for position. On one hand, you had the military, which had become increasingly influential under Khamenei's rule, and on the other, the clerical establishment, which felt its religious authority was being threatened by such a concentrated political dynasty. The people's reaction to Khamenei's death wasn't a unified one. Some saw it as an opportunity for change, hoping for a new, more inclusive system. Others feared that the absence of the supreme leader would lead to a power vacuum that could destabilize the country. Would Iran continue on the same path, or would it move toward more democratic reforms? As the dust settled, it became clear. The clergy were determined to keep their grip on the highest seat of power. The political structure of Iran, designed for a supreme leader, wasn't going to change overnight. So despite Mojtaba's controversial appointment, the clerical elite pushed to ensure that the Islamic Republic would remain intact and the supreme leader would remain the ultimate power. Khamenei's legacy didn't disappear with his death. In fact, it's still shaping the direction of Iran today. His policies, his foreign alliances, and even his military interventions continued to resonate, especially in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. And while some may say that his death opens the door to reform, others argue that his vision for Iran will continue to hold sway for generations to come. The question now is, with Khamenei gone, will Iran remain the theocratic powerhouse that he built, or will it finally take the steps toward a new chapter? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, the Khamenei era will not be easily forgotten.